welcome to Londata 5. So tonight wouldn't be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. So they are responsible for the cold beer in your hands. They're also responsible for more cold beer and also the warm food, hopefully that will be on your plate later. So we're going to start with Tiffany Schlain, and we're really delighted, actually pretty privileged to have Tiffany with us this evening. She's just swinging through town over from San Francisco. She's the founder of the Webby Awards and is a filmmaker extraordinaire, I guess would be the description, but I'll let her introduce herself. So please, warm round of applause for Tiffany.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm actually on vacation with my family, and this is like the one day, and I've been so energized. I gave a talk this morning, and you know, I'm near Silicon Valley and in San Francisco right now. There's such an amazing energy, and I definitely feel it in London around tech. So it's great to be here. I'm really interested in looking at the good, the bad, and the potential of technology. So I founded the Webby Awards, and I spent 10 years running it. But before the Webbies, I was a filmmaker. And when I was doing the Webbies and I finally saw YouTube and the potential of kind of the web with film, with kind of activating conversations and discussions around important issues, I knew I wanted to get back to filmmaking using the web. So at my film studio in San Francisco, we do a lot of experiments with technology. We use every technology out there to kind of push the envelope with film. So we had a film that right now, it premiered at Sundance. It's been in theaters around the United States and now is in theaters around Europe and other parts of the world and is screening at corporations and conferences. And I'll show you a 2-minute trailer from Connected First.
So I'm at lunch with this really good friend of mine, and we are having a fantastic time. I haven't seen her in years. We're laughing, drinking, talking, but I'm still getting this urge to check my email. And I was like, Tiffany, stay focused. You traveled all the way across the United States to see her. Stay focused. But eventually it was like, it overtook me. And then I faked needing to go to the bathroom. So I excused myself, grabbed my phone, go into the bathroom stall, kind of hiding, texting, emailing, thinking, what if I become? I can't be the only one sneaking to the bathroom to check my email. Technology is clearly changing us, and the way we connect with our friends, our families, and the world around us. So I set out to make a film about what it means to be connected in the 21st century. Things are changing. There's so much more to think about. And that pace of change is only accelerating. How much faster can it go before we can't keep up? This was the kind of question I was exploring in this film. And then I had this year that turned my world upside down. And forced me to rethink everything I thought I understood about the ways we're connected. We as humans have accumulated so much knowledge. Why do we have such a hard time seeing the bigger picture? For centuries, we've been declaring independence, and perhaps it's time to finally declare our interdependence.
So the next set of films that we've been working on are something that we're calling cloud filmmaking. So what we've been doing, there's a film series we're doing called Let It Ripple, Mobile Films for Global Change. And what we do is we usually put a script up and we invite people from all over the world to send us videos. So right now on this trip with my family, I'm videotaping lots of people, and then I edit it all together, and we're making these really fun films that are very collaborative and with people from all over the world. So I don't have enough time to show you those, but we had one, Moby did the music. It's been translated into 65 languages. You can check out on our site. If you want to stay posted, we have a whole bunch of, we have 3 new films coming out this fall. You can follow me on Twitter or our Facebook page, Connected the Film, or our website, Let It Ripple, or Connected, or the Moxie Institute. Thank you.
So nothing to stimulate the brain there, then, no? Okay, so telling stories with data, the main theme of the evening. So we're delighted to have Tiffany. We're also delighted to have Irene and Alex. So Irene is over from Boston, and she's data viz lead at a business called Boku. Alex works Guardian Interactive, and the award-winning Guardian Interactive. They've been working on a bunch of things together, not least of which the Miso project, which is supported by the Gates Foundation. But really, they're the best guys to talk about and introduce themselves. So please, round of applause to start with for Irene, I think.
Join me. And thank you, Tiffany. I've seen your work before, and it's so nice to follow you in the order of things. We wanted to talk to you guys about telling stories with data, specifically using data visualization being a format that we see more commonly used. It's something that both of us end up thinking about quite a bit. So my background in data visualization started many years ago. I worked on a project called Many Eyes with the great Martin Wattenberg and Fernando Viegas, and I've since kind of traveled a bit and ended at Boku, which is a consultancy in Boston that does open source work for as much as we can, and I'm a JavaScript developer, but I've been focusing more and more of my work on data visualization as of late.
Right, so my name's Alex, and I work with the interactive team at The Guardian. So we tend to be responsible for sort of the bigger and more sophisticated pieces of data viz you'll see on Guardian Co. UK. Before I was there, I actually worked in finance, sort of doing visualization around sort of market trends and trade analysis, which was a very different world, but I have since repented and joined The Guardian. My original background was actually graphic design, but I mostly work as a programmer these days.
The search started for me thinking about message actually during the Egypt Revolution. So I grew up in the Middle East in Israel for many years. And so I cared a lot about what was happening in that part of the country, but I wasn't there anymore. I didn't really have any people to ask. And so being a news junkie and a data viz junkie, I started trying to see how people were representing what was happening in Egypt in my community. And what I found was actually kind of disappointing. What I saw was a lot of tweets being visualized. I saw a lot of key events being mentioned. I saw a lot of term frequencies being visualized in all sorts of ways. And I saw a lot of media that was coming out of the tweets and so on, but I couldn't, in my head, put it all together. I had a really difficult time understanding all the underlying situation that was happening. You know, I just saw kind of these random bits of information. They were all floating, and nobody was assembling it for me. It was kind of on me. And I grew up in that area. If I can't do it, you know, neither can a lot of other busy folks. And so I realized that it was because I was stuck in this perpetual now, right? So if you think about your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed, everything is happening right now. You have no idea what your friends posted a week ago because that would require so much scrolling. And none of us are going to do that. And the other problem was that I only saw what was known, right? I mean, there was this massive event happening, and the only thing I was getting was going through these, you know, technologies, right? So nothing was being tweeted that was happening behind closed doors. And I did not know what I didn't know, right? So there's a lot of conversations about how do we talk about uncertainty? How do we know that we're missing data? And none of that conversation was really happening in the sphere. You know, we proclaimed the Egypt revolution, the social media revolution, and it did play a really big role. But I've yet to sort of hear someone very critically talk about what we missed by relying so much on that data. And so what I really wanted was to understand why things were happening, right? I wanted some context. I wanted to understand the political atmosphere. I wanted to sit down with a bunch of grandmothers and just have them complain to me for 5 hours, but I couldn't figure out how to know that, how to find them. And I wanted to know what I didn't know, right? And the main reason, the main learning that came out of this experience for me was that the data is not actually information, right? Data in itself is just bits and things, and we have to figure out how to assemble them and how to query them and what questions to ask, and context becomes so important for understanding the data, and also shapes our understanding of this data.
So that kind of brings us to what we're doing in a way, which is a project called Miso. So Miso is a set of JavaScript libraries, basically. It's not a general tool, but it's designed to make it much, much easier to build much more sophisticated pieces of interactive data visualization and build them sort of out of parts that are already on the shelf. So basically it's made up of a series of JavaScript libraries, and the first one of those is Dataset. So Dataset is basically a library that makes it very easy to load data into the client. So you can basically pull in CSV files, REST APIs, JSON, pretty much anything you want, and then have a standardized interface to it. And the thing that we've learned, particularly at The Guardian from working with a lot of data over time, is that most of the time your data will be a mess, and you can really rely on it being in a clean form. So basically what we tried to do with Dataset is make it very easy to tidy that stuff up on the fly, so that you don't have to worry so much about doing that beforehand or worry about bad data being put in by journalists halfway through when something's live. So it gives you tools to kind of clean that up on the way in.
And the next part we're working on is a library we'll release hopefully in a month or two called Miso Block. And it's, the focus is really to create a framework that lets you create reusable components and sort of wrap them in a standardized interface that you can then sort of tie together in the future. And sort of the focus being on code reuse. And the other focus being on being able to create very skinny components. So a lot of sort of off-the-shelf libraries will give you 100 functions, and you can enable and disable them, and all is great, but then your code is huge. And if you don't really need that, you shouldn't have to kind of take all that or rip that out manually or whatnot. So a big focus of this piece too is to allow you to create sort of the most basic thing that you can, and then attach sort of user interaction to it, or browser events and so on and so forth. The idea that you can sort of grow it over time. And the reason we're doing it in this way is that there's already an existing ecosystem of libraries that's growing all the time. There's amazing libraries out there that we use all the time as well. And we don't want to try and replace them. We're not trying to be another Viz library that has the best line chart ever. Because somebody else will write another one in 2 months and it'll be even better. And that's the beauty of open source, yay. But what we really want to do is sort of build on top of it and say, okay, well, you wrote this thing, that's great. Take 10 minutes, wrap it up in sort of our libraries, that will take care of a lot of sort of event delegation and binding and connecting things together for you. And then you'll sort of have that, and you can tie a lot of different things together.
So what we mean by blocks is kind of visual components like tree maps, or even interface components, sliders, lists, things like that. But it's the ability to take a simple component like a pie chart and very quickly customize that for a particular project or a particular use case, but then have that code in a reusable format. So you can kind of almost build up house styles over time, which is something that I think a lot of organizations will want to do. And it's worth talking about what Miso isn't as well, just to be absolutely clear. This is not going to be a visualize this button. It's not a tool for general people to create sort of quick charts. It's very much aimed at developers, but not at a very high level, so they can quickly create more complex pieces. The other thing to say is that it's not Guardian specific in any way. It's not a way of creating Guardian graphics. There's nothing about it which is exclusive to the Guardian in any way. It's a completely open source project. We're actually working with a few other news orgs to get them involved as well, because we're really keen to make this into a much more open platform that everyone can actually use to build things.
But what Miso is open source and free as in beer. Which is sort of what I'm the most excited about coming from the open source world. Building something like this in a larger community, in a larger ecosystem is incredibly useful for us, because we listen to our users all the time. Even whenever we get feedback, we try to not only address it, but also listen to the community and try to understand what it is that people need. We're all on all the mailing lists and all those visualization libraries. And it's really the only way to create something that is sustainable, because if tomorrow we're both hit by a bus, I would love for this project not to die. It's a great way to see it evolve into something that's really useful. We got a lot of really interesting uses out of the dataset library that we totally didn't expect. And they've sort of shaped and formed the way that library is evolving, and we're really excited about some of those uses. And so, as we're going to be releasing some of these other components, we would really love if you kept in touch with us, either via the site or the Twitter feed, the Twitter handle. We're always on it, or email us, and there's a million ways to get a hold of us. But we are legitimately listening and want to build it, for all of you guys.
So if you want to get involved, get in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to come at you from a slightly different perspective. I've been working in kind of the security industry for about 13 years or so, and I've been doing data viz in that industry. One of the things about the industry is it's closed, so it's not always visible to the outside world. I'm going to talk to you about kind of the outstanding questions that are interesting in this particular community, and I'm going to show you some pictures. essentially, the problem with in the security industry, I'm talking about police now and law enforcement, national security. The problem is essentially the problem on the left-hand side. Usually, what the hell just happened? Where did it happen? When did it happen? How exactly did the event happen? Whether it's a murder or something really hideous like a terrorist attack. And the way that visualization helps understand that is through essentially 3 different visualization techniques. The first one, which is really close to me, is timelines. So it's really important to establish timelines of activity, whether it's phone calls, emails, it could be when cars went under a bridge, it could be what time someone said in a witness statement, it could be all kinds of things. To establish the basic sequence of events is one of the first things that people do. The second thing is they need to draw maps. The third thing is networks. So networks is one of my specialities. Networks are really, really important because to understand a crime, normally people are influenced by people close to them, and it's one of the first things that the police will look at is the relationship, family relationships, friend relationships, all that kind of thing, and they draw networks for that. Ultimately, then, they put that into a composite view, which I'll show you in a second, which then eventually kind of enters into the cycle. At some point, it gets turned into evidence, and that gets to court, and then lawyers see it, and jurors see it, and people get convicted. So networks is my speciality. Networks is really key to understand well, certainly terrorism work. Here's a network of, it's an open source data set of, and it shows kind of interesting things. These are nationalities. This is a terrorist cell in Germany. This is a cell in Saudi. And you can see straight away, just from the arrangement of this, there is something interesting going on. So a lot of the Saudi network is very spread out. So these guys are a very large number of hops away from people in their own country. Where there's a link between countries is an interesting thing generally for national security perspective. People draw these kind of networks, and they're not just a network. You know, they're not just a picture. They're actually something you say, okay, what should we do? Should we listen to this guy? Should we arrest this guy? And in some cases, you don't want to know what they do to that guy. Here's an attempt to join space and time together. So this is the Mumbai attacks. We're trying to represent, you know, these guys here joined up at this place and did some horrible things. These guys joined up at this place and did some horrible things, and then they joined together with these 2 guys. Now, I don't really like this. I mean, this is one of mine. I don't really like it. But to show how people join together at certain locations over time is actually a really hard thing. Okay, and then the last one I'll end on is a real one. When 9/11 happened, at some point the information got to the president. This is a picture of when that happened, and I designed this software on the right. I spent 5-6 years designing this software. Can you imagine the amount of money underneath this picture in terms of the intelligence spend? Can you imagine how much that is? I'll give you an idea. It's about $60 billion a year. Okay, now that $60 billion a year results in some A4 and A3 sheets stuck together with sellotape. Okay, the point is, I guess a serious one, is that this president at this point, what information does he have to go on? He can only really go on the information that's presented to him. And I'm not saying any way political at all. I'm just saying that maybe we should work to a place where decision makers have better tools in front of them than this. And that's all I have to say. Thanks very much.
So it's Q&A time, and I know that you've been storing up a bunch of questions via Twitter, and I'm sure you've got some in person. Just while we're doing that, there's a question here, asked Londata. What licenses MISA covered by?
It's GPL and MIT. So dual licensed.
So basically anything you want.
Pick your flavor.
I'm Noel Yinsky. I do data visualization consulting, and also not a question, but a comment that I really appreciate that you were talking about. There's been all these tools to make infographics, and they won't be successful because the tools and the canned output is not interesting and generally not useful, and it actually does take some design and some process and some thinking exactly to your point that you said a couple of times, which I love. You have to understand why you're there. You have to understand what you're trying to communicate, and the format that your visualization will take is going to vary with that. And like that needs to be said like 1,000 times to everybody who wants to do data visualization, because it takes a long time to learn that and figure that out. So yeah, thanks very much for bringing that up again.
Hi, my name is Makoto from New Bamboo. I actually use MISO a few times. I think I sent the GitHub pull request.
Indeed you did.
So yeah, I actually look at the code base, and in terms of data set, there's a lot of emphasis on the importer library where you try to take the API or like a Google Doc. So I sense that like you focus is not just like visualizing the snapshot of the static data, but looks like you want to divert into more getting the real-time data. Yes. My question is, when the focus shift from visualizing static to more dynamic, what kind of shift you think you want to foresee?
So dataset came about very organically, and that both of us were just tired of writing the same code separately, and then we met in September and realized we're writing the same library, and said we have to do this, as a joint effort. And because Alex gets to work at The Guardian and constantly produce these pieces, he's familiar with all the pains of data that kind of come along with it. And so Dataset ended up evolving based on our experiences, but also general patterns that we saw with people who have to produce really quick things, have to do with data, and the data sources are really diverse. So for example, I know someone had used the polling functionality actually on the Node. So Dataset also works in Node if you want to use it on your server. And they had used it for some Twitter data kind of thing. So one thing that happened is that Dataset ended up being used not just for visualization projects, but just as a way to fetch data, because it sort of captures the full life. We're trying to capture the full life cycle. So from you have data somewhere else, and then you have to fetch it, and then you want to query it, you want to filter it, you want to have it you want to modify it and have it an evented system by which you can sort of know that these things are happening, or things of that sort. And so in a sense, we ended up realizing we want to cover that full scale.
Yeah.
It's quite hard, isn't it? I think to go from a static view to a streaming kind of data view is quite a big mindset change. I think we've been playing a bit with some live Twitter network generation, and I mean, there's a lot of just the basic timings and things that are difficult, and just volumes get really difficult as well, right? And so
I mean, I don't think we haven't actually done a huge amount of real-time projects with Dataset yet, but we've very much engineered it with that in mind. Because I think particularly with things like electoral data, we've got these constant updates coming in, you want that functionality, but what we want to do is structure it in such a way that it's very easy to kind of build evented components on top of it and have a lot of that plumbing happen for you, basically. So you've got these events that you can hook into in your data set, or your views that come off that, so you group your data, you can still hook into an event on that and get updates all the way through that stream. So as long as you build your components, you box the right way, you basically get all that real-time stuff for free, and that's the really nice thing.
My name is Baljit. I work at a local authority in London, so a local council. The problems that, I've been there for 3 years now, and the problems that they're facing are more extreme now, but, with the cuts and everything, and and there's a lot of data, obviously, in a local authority, and decision makers need to actually see and make sense, see the data, make sense of what it's telling them, or find new insights and make decisions. And they're not quite there yet, at least my local authority. I'm just wondering what your experiences are in visualization analytics in a local authority, sort of context, the sort of problems that they've got to deal with and make decisions on. And in terms of visualization, are any of the mainstream sort of BI vendors, in your experiences, are they, which ones sort of come out on top?
My opinion of the the BI vendors is that I think they should be worried, because it's just simply because of the amount of open source tools that are coming out right now, and I think it's so quick to build things together. I mean, I could even plug Mongo here, and Mongo is a great database to get things up and running quickly. And so yeah, I mean, I think what that means in practical sense is that with a small team, a data team in a council, and I don't have much experience in councils, but I would believe that with a small team and a set of open source tools and some good questions, you should be able to come up with something compelling now and not have to rely on, a very big vendor to help you out. I would hope so, anyway. I don't know whether you agree with that.
I think I'd agree with the sentiment, yeah. I mean, I don't really know the problem space you're dealing with in any detail, but I'm not sure that an off-the-shelf solution is probably going to be the best one, because you're probably dealing with quite specific problems to that industry. I don't know whether there's any BI vendors that are serving that. Well, there may well be, but I'm not aware of any.
I think when people ask me that question, I say, don't think about buying $200,000 worth of BI software. Hire one data scientist, and then have them talk to your business people and understand the questions, because part of the problem, there's a good friend of mine who's actually here in London working a little bit with The Guardian to kind of help them understand what data science can do, because the biggest problem that there's the folks who have to make business decisions, they don't really necessarily understand data and what they can derive out of it. And then there's the data people who don't really know what they should be doing with the data. They're just like futzing around with it because it's fun, it's so fun. And what they really need is to connect those two things. And so the biggest power of having this continuous communication cycle is that, you know, business people will have a better idea of knowing what questions they can ask, and data science folks will better understand what they can crunch the data and derive out of it. So I wish I had a data science with me at all times, not just with me at all times, to kind of help me do my job. So that's my biggest advice.
Yeah.
I just had a follow-up comment to that, because I used to work in public sector as well. I used to work for a charity. And what I found there is two things. One is usually they have a budget, and there's a lot of political investment in getting a good system in place. So there's probably been years of discussion, and in the end they just end up buying something which the vendor has told them it will fit their needs, but then it's not future-proof, so in a few years' time they end up having the same discussion again. Yeah. The other thing is that quite often the data is for survival. So the charity will need to justify its existence, you know, by showing that they've met targets or things like that. So I think the shift that's needed there is probably something a bit more, in a sense, there's a lot of benefit to be had there from open source technologies, because they could just try something a bit more innovative and stuff like that. But it's a shift towards actually being able to use the data not just for survival, but actually to boost themselves, to, you know, to find new interesting applications or potentially new areas that they hadn't explored and things like that. So but I think this kind of idea that they have to have one tailor-made solution, which is going to cost them hundreds of thousands of pounds, is like a real throttle on their capability to innovate in a way.
So the US Intel community's starting to make moves in this direction. So historically they would acquire things in that manner. But there's a really good talk by the director of the CIA, the CTO of the CIA, just a few months ago, who wants to move to a much more quick buying cycle where they effectively rent software. You know, and if it's not good enough, they throw it away and rent someone else's. And that's really going to change the shape of procurement if it happens in that community.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just sort of echo that a bit and just sort of say, I mean, I think you probably get better value out of having one contractor there for a while who manages to produce something which gives you that one chart that tells you the number you need than a big BI system that gives you a whole bunch of like dashboard stats that don't actually mean that much. Yeah, it's just finding those numbers that really matter and digging into it.
Great. Well, with that, let's give a big round of applause to our speakers tonight. You did a fantastic job. Thanks, guys. Also need to thank, again, our extremely generous sponsors for this evening. So Tangen, Sky, and O'Reilly. So a big round of applause for those guys, please.